The first speaker this afternoon is Dr. Joe Ikley. He is an extension weed specialist. He's been at NDSU for a few years and always has a lot of good information to share.
All right. Thank you, Sam. So basically this morning I wanted to cover three topics today by way of an update for weed control and dry bean. First, just be a quick label update. And I wanted to share some recent research where we are revisiting looking at different group 14 and 15 herbicides and their potential fit into dry bean production. And then I know Greg Indris alluded to a rolling trial earlier during his talk. And I'll share the weed control data from that trial. So first, as far as an update for label, the dual magnum label, we do now have a post-emergence label for use in dry bean. The screenshot here on the top part of the screen. So this is from the label itself, basically saying that we can apply only after the first trifoliate stage from a post-emergence standpoint. So either apply pre-emergence before the dry beans are out of the ground, or wait until that first trifoliate is emerged. Bottom part of the slide here is the screenshot from the weed guide from this year. So I went ahead and put a cap on up to flowering. There is no actual on the label. There's no end date to when to make that application. But just for a crop safety standpoint, we want to make sure once we're flowering, hopefully that dual magnum is already on if we decide to use that. So basically just another group 15 option, similar to Outlook, but we do now have that post-emergence label for dual. Do not know how many or if any generics of S-metolachlor currently carry this label, but I'm assuming that they will all have that very quickly. Okay, so since we kind of have a new use for dual and dry beans, I knew this was coming about a year or two ago, and so we thought it'd be a good idea to revisit our different group 14 and 15 herbicides that we currently utilize in soybean. So we had a trial in the 2022 growing season near Hillsboro. We planted on May 25th. All pre-emergence treatments were applied at planting. We got about 1 inch of rainfall the first 7 days after planting. And then I'll share a few post-emergence treatments that were applied about a month after that. I will point out we did repeat this trial in 2023, but it did not rain for the first month after planting. So dry beans were about second or third trifoliate by the time we got any sort of rainfall. So I'm just not sharing that data because there's not much to look at from a crop safety standpoint. So first I want to focus on the different group 14 products. We had 9 different treatments in this trial. The product name as we know it will be here in the middle part of the screen. I do have to, of course, put this caveat that most everything on this chart is not labeled currently. So these bottom 8 or so have 1 asterisk that's not labeled. Reflex is a little bit different. Where pre-emergence, if we're in what we call zone 5, and I'll explain that here in just 1 second, we cannot use reflex pre-emergence currently, but there's another zone on the reflex label where we can. But essentially, before I get to that point, 2 different rates of Reviton, relatively new product on the market, revisiting a look at Sharpen. Blazer and Cobra, we utilize these post-emergence in soybeans, wanted to actually look at them from a pre-emergence standpoint, and then 2 rates of Valor, and then the equivalent rate of Spartan by itself at the highest allowable rate we can use in the premix of Spartan Charge. So that's the different group 14 products we tested. So again, just revisiting the reflex label pretty quickly. Region 5 is a lot of our growing area, but there is this Region 4 label where if you are south of I-94, basically in Minnesota, you can apply reflex pre-emergence. So that will be applicable to some, but currently not labeled for a lot of people probably joining in. So I want to just kind of hop right into some data. So here's some crop injury data 28 days after planting from that 2022 trial. I actually have it by active ingredient on the x-axis, but I'll point out by trade name as I point out a few specific treatments. And then injury is on the y-axis. Basically only goes up to about 12. We did not see overall a whole lot of injury on that trial from this year. So sulfentrazone, that's Spartan. No injury in that treatment, which is good because that is labeled. The products that were similar from a crop injury standpoint, Lactofen is Cobra, and these are the 2 different rates, 1 and 2 ounces of Reviton here on the far right. So by 28 days after planting, even though we detected a little bit of injury, those were the 3 treatments statistically similar to Spartan. And then the other treatments were basically between 5 and 10% injury at that rating date. So overall, injury I wasn't terribly concerned with on this trial as a whole. But again, pointing out Cobra, 2 rates for Reviton, the exact same as basically spraying nothing or spraying Spartan by itself, which is labeled. How did the weed control look? So in this trial, we only had red root pigweed. So this is now a weed control from 0 to 100 on red root pigweed. Treatments in the same order. So again, if I focus on what's labeled here, Spartan gave us about 70% weed control, and this was 6 weeks after planting. So hopefully by now in a commercial setting, we would have applied our post-emergence treatment. We wanted to really see how these products would perform. So Spartan gave us about 70% control. Reflex, both rates of Valor, and actually Cobra all gave us about 90% control from, again, these were pre-emergence applications of these products. So I've now just circled in red the products that were very similar to Spartan from the crop safety standpoint. So Cobra did not provide a lot of crop injury and provided very good residual control of red root pigweed in this trial. Reviton, not much crop injury, but not much residual weed control, which is not too surprising as Reviton does not really claim residual weed control on the label. It's really more of a burn down product for us. So that's a group 14. So looking at our different group 15 products. So here we had some pre-emergence applications. These first 4 are just dual outlook, warrant, and Zidua applied pre-emergence. Same planting date, same rainfall environment as the last trial. And then we applied each of these post-emergence at about second trifoliate dry bean. And then just 2 different rates of Zidua just to try and really tease that product out. From a crop safety standpoint, this bar in the middle separates pre-emergence on the left from post-emergence on the right. So S-metolachlor is dual, dimethenamide that's outlook. These are the 2 products that are currently labeled for use in dry bean, about 5 to 7% injury. And then basically warrant and Zidua were somewhere in between there. And statistically, warrant was about the same as outlook. Zidua causing the least amount of injury, but pretty similar to dual or metolachlor. So if they're just shown from a pre-emergence standpoint, on as far as crop injury on pinto beans is concerned, all the group 15s are pretty similar, 10% injury or less. Post-emergence, as far as just injury from these products, the 2 currently labeled products, we have dual or metolachlor, very minimal injury. And I should say this was 28 days after planting. So this is actually about 7 days after the post-emergence application. So about a week after we applied these is the injury on the right side of the screen here. And so outlook, we did get about 20% injury, mostly represented in some oil burn on many of the leaves that were emerged. The other 3 products tested were basically somewhere in between. So from a crop safety standpoint, on the currently non-registered products, they fall right in between the 2 that we do have registered from what we saw from this trial year. Won't spend too much time here on residual weed control since a lot of us utilize these group 15s, if not in dry bean, within soybean and other crops. But essentially, dual and outlook from a pre-emergence standpoint, it's 75 to 95% control. Warrant and Zidua basically about the same. So crop safety, they look similar. Weed control, they look pretty similar from a pre-emergence standpoint. So we're going to continue to explore this and definitely test on different market classes to make sure we have some crop safety data that we're comfortable with, and maybe we might be able to make these products available into the future. That'll be to be determined. Post-emergence did not look at weed control from these products from that post-emergence application. So just really to summarize the results of that trial, this one, first bullet point, was pretty interesting to me. So we actually included both Cobra and Blazer as a pre-emergence treatment because of a note I saw on the Cobra label probably 5 years ago. That within the soybean section indicates we can utilize Cobra pre-emergence. There on the label claims about 2 weeks of residual weed control, maybe over across several different environments that may be about what the average is. this trial year, we'd happen to get about 6 weeks of good control on red root pigweed. Looking at some other bean markets, we can utilize cobra and snap beans pre-emergence in a couple of different states. So again, maybe this is something we'll continue to pursue and might be an option in the future to be determined. Again, Reviton, that one definitely showed promise for us in no-till dry bean production because we did not see any crop injury. And again, we're not focused on the residual weed control standpoint, but from a burn down perspective, Reviton performs pretty similar to Sharpen on many weeds. And so it could be a fit in our no-till dry bean production. Again, that would be something we would have to pursue with the company and a few other entities. And then those group 15s, pretty similar. So research will be continued, but basically just trying to get a few more products that are currently registered potentially into the dry bean market. So shifting gears now for the last part of my talk, really want to focus on that rolling trial that Greg introduced during his talk. And Greg, I apologize, I did miss the beginning part of your talk, Elise. So if you shared this data, stick with me for just revisiting it here real quickly. But just the 2021 dry bean survey, we questioned how many people or what percentage of acres get rolled. About 2/3 of the acres got some sort of rolling. 50% of the acres were rolled pre-emergence. About 5% were rolled after the crop was emerged. And the rest that did get a rolling application or treatment were pre-plant. So basically either no-till production or even conventional till, but just rolled before you got the planter there. So where I became interested is what is the impact of this rolling operation on weed control? Just for time's sake today, we're going to focus mainly on the pre-emergence rolling and what that might do to our weed control standpoint. There are some post-emergence rolling, so rolling about second trifoliate. Not going to focus on that today, but it essentially did not impact weed control at all. So focusing on where we conducted these trials, I'll start at the bottom part of the screen. We kind of did a pilot program in 2022 at one of our sites near Armenia. This was on soybean. Saw enough interesting data there that we wrote a grant for North Harvest, and thank you to North Harvest and everyone for funding this. So in 2023, we shifted the focus to dry bean production, 3 different sites. So we had one site in Fargo, which was a no-till site. And then we had that same site in Armenia, plus we had Greg Indris had a site out in Carrington. Both of those were conventionally tilled. So I'll revisit that as we go through some data slides. As far as the weed species at each site, Fargo, our no-till site, it was just water hemp. So just one weed species at that site. Armenia, we had predominantly yellow foxtail and pal amaranth, so a foxtail and a pigweed. But a whole bunch of different other grass and broadleaf weeds that were rated as well. Carrington, the dominant species was green foxtail, but there were 5 different or 6 different small seeded broadleaf weeds that we did measure in these treatments. So first thing I want to show is the 2022 data. And I need to take a minute to lay out the treatments on this slide because every slide that follows this one will be laid out the exact same way. So all the data I'll be presenting today is weed density, plants per meter squared, or think of that as plants per yard squared, since I did not convert this back into English units. The scale will change within each slide, but it's always density of weeds per square meter. 5 different treatments are going to be on the bottom part of the screen. The far left here is going to be a treatment where we did not roll and we did not apply herbicide. So all we did was plant and then measure weeds about 3 to 4 weeks after planting. The far right side of the screen is, again, no herbicide, but where we did roll pre-emergence. So planted and then rolled. The middle 3 columns is where we applied a pre-emergence herbicide. So I have Broadax listed here. That's the exact same product as Spartan Elite or Authority Elite. So at least in the North Dakota side, we can utilize that product from utilizing the 24C label. So 3 different ways of using Broadax in this trial. First one is where we did not roll and applied the herbicide. So planted, applied our herbicide, and then measured about 3 or 4 weeks later. The middle set of columns, that's where we planted, then we rolled, and then we applied our herbicide. And the last remaining one is where we planted, then we applied our herbicide, and then we rolled. So we want to see if there's any influence on the sequence of making that roll-in application and making our herbicide application. And so I'll stay on the middle part of the screen as I go through the data on this slide. So this is 2022. Again, this was on soybean, but from a pre-emergence standpoint, could have been dry bean that year as well. 28 days after planting, the yellow bars are the composite grasses, density per square meter. Green bars are the composite broadleaf weeds. And basically, as long as we apply that herbicide, it did not matter if we rolled, didn't matter the sequence of rolling, pretty similar weed control or weed pressure. Far left, we had about 100 grasses per square meter and about 50 broadleafs per square meter where we did not roll and did not apply a herbicide. But then by simply rolling, we about tripled our broadleaf pressure and doubled our grass pressure in this trial year. And so that's basically we had some greater seed soil contact, a few other things going on there, but mainly by rolling, we increased weed density. What did this look like? Left picture here is again where this is our conventional till site. So we tilled, planted, walked away. This is what the weed pressure looked like. Right picture is where we rolled. And you can see just a lot more green, particularly in between the middle rows here compared to the picture on the left. We did get lucky and have two of these plots line up back to back. So here in the back part of the screen is where we rolled without applying a herbicide. And the front part, again, is where we did not roll. Just a lot more bare dirt you're seeing, particularly in those middle two rows, indicating that there's lower weed pressure in these plots. That was 2022. What about 2023? Generally, drier season for us and a lot warmer after planting. So it took about a week less to get up to that second trifoliate stage for us. So all data were collected about 20 days after planting in 2023. We're still in that Armenia conventional tilled site. Everything else about this screen is the same, just 2023. And so again, starting in the middle, basically no difference on grass pressure or broadleaf pressure when we apply that herbicide. Interestingly enough, we also did not have a whole lot of weed pressure, particularly the broadleaf weeds in this trial this past year. Grass weeds a little bit more, but I should indicate that the grass weed pressure was variable in 2023. And so even though you'll see numerical differences here, there were no statistical differences in this trial. But similar to 2022 at this site, where we did roll, we did increase our broadleaf weed pressure, almost about tripled it. Carrington, green foxtail basically dominated this trial, did not see a difference in rolling versus not rolling, and our herbicide application did decrease the pressure. The no-till site, similar to Carrington this year, by 3 weeks, we did not see the impact of rolling increasing that weed density, but we did take this out to about 6 weeks after planting. We did get some more rainfall about 4 weeks after planting, and we did ultimately see more weed pressure in that rolling treatment when we took these plots out an additional 3 weeks or so. So Sam's on the screen, which means I need to wrap it up. So conclusions for this trial. At our Armenia site in both years, we did increase weed pressure by rolling in the absence of a herbicide. So what this means is that if you roll, don't get that pre-emergence herbicide on, we have greater selection pressure, more weeds to deal with when we come back to make our post-emergence application. When we did apply that pre-emergence herbicide, we did not influence weed density. So my lucrative statement of the morning here is that this might have an overall benefit on our weed seed bank. If rolling increased weed density, weeds that emerged, but applying a herbicide meant we were dealing with the same amount of weeds when we went to make our post-emergence application, to me that means more weeds germinated and were intercepted and killed by our herbicide. So something to certainly measure in future years to get a better handle on that situation. And I didn't have time to touch on today, but again, the post-emergence rolling did not affect weed control. With that, Sam, I'll wrap it up. For those who want the electronic version of the weed guide, there's a QR code on the bottom right.